all my modern players watching this video, I've done it. As the title and thumbnail suggest, I have found the solution to fix the woes of the modern format, and I'm here to talk about it today. I want to present to you what I think needs to be changed with the modern format, and a ban or two that will push the format in a good direction, keep the diversity, but also provide a little bit of breathing room for some of the more lesser traveled decks out there and push some of the top heavy stuff to the bottom. Now, specifically, this conversation comes off of one of my more well-performing videos, to be honest, and it's one I did recently on kind of the problem with modern. I was outlining the problems with the 4-color Omnath deck, the Murktide deck, and just kind of the various types of packages that exist in the format. And I mean, just go check out the video itself. It's not too long, but I think it highlights the point pretty damn well about engines and the type of overarching strategies that exist. And once you start putting them together, you realize that the kind of whole modern metagame itself is taken up by only a couple of strategies. And I think these bannings can actually solve them. Let's get right into the point. I'm going to be honest. Consistency is at the root of the problem. There's too much consistency at the top of the modern metagame, and of course that, the caveat is, of course, the most consistent decks are going to be at the top of the modern metagame, but it doesn't mean that other decks aren't as consistent. There's a lot of things that have come out, for example, of the Modern Horizons formats. This article by Hipsters of the Coast, actually, by Rob Bockman, is really great, outlining general consistency in Magic and some of the recent bits with kind of the companions themselves. A very short read. I'm going to link it down below. Love Hipsters of the Coast. Anyway, consistency is at the key of this, and I think the top decks are way too consistent because of these cards, and I think they need to go so that the consistency can be on on par with the rest of the modern metagame, leveling things out and giving other decks a chance to breathe. This is the BNR that I want to see. This right here, August 29th or whenever it is, I want to see this article come out with Wrenn 6 being banned, Expressive iteration being banned, and honestly, Magic Twitter and all of its garbage opinions scrubbed from the internet. The Magic Twitter bit is a bit of a joke, but we all know Twitter needs to go. Wrenn 6, Expressive iteration are the keys here. I think these are the two cards that are providing the kind of top heavy upward swing for like two decks, and it's really pushing down any level of expressionism, creativity, whatever it might be in the modern format, and is creating a false sense of diversity. I think a lot of people are unaware of this, especially those that don't necessarily play a lot of modern. You're not playing, 2, 3, 4 leagues per week. You're not seeing these decks or these problems in advance. This is what I want to show you. I think that this is the problem. Now, first and foremost, let's go right into the first card. I want to talk about Expressive iteration. Now, as a 2-mana sorcery, a lot of people have actually compared this to like Brainstorm and Ponder. This card is absolutely insane in terms of what it does. In the deck it played, obviously Murktide Regent, it does a lot in terms of providing top deck power, filtering, whatever it might be. And it's seen as an analog in many ways to Serum Visions in the deck. A deck will play Serum Visions, and if the card itself was to go, the deck would really just play more copies of Serum Visions and the more copies of threats. But Serum Visions itself, if you compare it, isn't really a direct analog. This card draws one card for 1 mana, and then you scry 2, you set up your future turns. Expressive iteration, on the other hand, if you kind of go backwards, comes down on turn 3, usually, sometimes on turn 2, is able to put a card into your hand, put your worst card at the bottom, and then exile a card, providing some flex if you can cast it, or even potentially exiling an even worse card. So for example, if you wanted to exile a land, you can put that in exile. Let's say you can't cast it. If you wanted to put a threat that you didn't need at the bottom of your library, you put that away, and then you put maybe your Ragavan into your hand. This is one of the most powerful top decks out there, because not only do you get the Serum Visions effect of drawing a card, you get to draw a card off your top 3. And then you get to take the worst card out of your top 3 and put it at the bottom. And then you get to take a card that you might want to cast, or even another bad card, as I mentioned, and exile it. There are so many damn things that you can do with this card. It provides one of the most explosive, as I mentioned, top decks in the format, and it's absolutely so like diminishing to have resolved against you when there's no counterplay to it. Obviously you can counter it, but this deck is playing some of the most efficient counter magic out there. Half the time it's going to cast this with Spell Pierce backup, and if you don't have a way to counter it with that one last mana, it's just going to unholy heat your threat and continue with its advantage from there. Honestly, the card is just taken way too damn far. And a 2-mana to sorcery, I didn't think in Modern I would ever say that this card needs to be banned, but I think it's providing way too much consistency to this deck. I think this deck with Just Consider and Serum Visions is perfectly fine. Give me the ability to have my black removal spells or my white removal spells, whatever it is, be good enough to remove their threats and not have to worry about these top decks. Let me go 1-for-1 with Murktide's threats and not have Expressive Iteration blow me out of the water. I may sound like a bit of a traditionalist in terms of Modern, but heck, cards like this, I mean, it's won bonuses. It didn't even come out of Modern Horizons. Like, it needs to go. Number 2. The next card I want to talk about is really the card that I don't think enough people are really talking about. And I remember this being brought up to me actually in a tournament I went to in paper. Shout out to you, Tyler, if you're watching this video. But bringing this concept of Wrenn 6 being the problematic card in the Modern format. Now me as a mill player, I have my bias. I really hate endurance, but I understand its point generally. I understand why the elementals were printed as a subcategory of creatures that haven't really been able to be lifted to the upper echelons of play, and now they are. It's crazy what these decks can do. But I think Wrenn 6 is a 1 enabler, and I think the context for this can be found when you take a step back to where it originally got banned. I'm talking about the Legacy banning. On November 18, 2019, Wrenn 6 was banned in Legacy. A format more powerful than Modern, Wrenn 6 was thrown to the sunders. It was thrown to the ground and exiled. Specifically quoting that Wrenn 6 brought about the kind of higher win rates of 3 to 4 color decks, and as well provided a lot of consistency with the lands, terrible interactions and for you to play against with Wasteland, and really just shut out the X ones in the format, i.e. literally Death and Taxes and most of the other stuff that exists as cheap interactive creatures in the Legacy format. Wrenn 6 was a true menace, and I think slowly we're starting to see this in the Modern format. And obviously in this deck itself, in the 4-color, 5-color Omnath deck, it's really expensive. People are like, well, you don't really see much of that. But I want to bring that back to the expensive bit. As I said in my previous video, this is one of the best decks in the format because it allows cards like Teferi Time Raveler, Eternal Witness, and Lightning Bolt all to coexist in the same deck thanks to Wrenn 6, because Wrenn 6 is able to take that first fetch or that second fetch, bring it back, give you the perfect mana you need to then be able to cast cards like Omnath Locus of Creation on turn 4 consistently. Now that is absolutely insane. Not even kind of mentioning the fact that it pitches to Endurance, it pitches to Fury, whatever it might be for your extra copies. Not only is the card also a damn win condition with this -7 being able to retrace your Lightning Bolts, retrace your Prismatic Endings, and retrace your extra turn spells if you're playing them. The card does it all. It's a removal spell, it's a consistency engine, and it's a win condition, all wrapped up in a 2-mana red-green planeswalker that heck is able to defend itself so damn well. There are so many problems with this card in the Modern format, and I think a lot of people have forgotten about this now that Jund has been pushed out of the format, because the new mid-range deck of the format is 4-color. And I really need to express this. I really need to just get to the point of it where, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's all about consistency. And the problem is that the Murktide decks and the 4-color decks are way too consistent in what they're doing. As I mentioned, there's a lot of other decks that have a similar level, slightly less consistency, but they don't have this explosive power. They don't have the power of turn 2 Wrenn 6, because Bloodchief's Thirst isn't a great card in this format. Counterspell is illegal in this format, but I mean, heck, even Spell Pierce is. But Counterspell is a 2-mana spell just like Wrenn 6. Spell Pierce comes down, but a lot of times you go down on turn 2, you play Wrenn 6, and you're able to kill that turn 1 Ragavan that your Murktide opponent played. There's a lot of counterplay that exists in the format, but it doesn't mean that it's actually good counterplay, because you still see the deck at the upper echelons. It's because it's consistent. It provides a clean mana base for a deck that shouldn't be possible with the colors it has. And along with it, you have Expressive Iteration giving the explosive draw power, that long game that exists for the Murktide decks. Heck, even in the Luros era, we saw that Murktide Regent was able to be consistent and up there and compete with the companion decks. And that 100% has a lot to do with the late game power and consistency that something like Expressive Iteration provides. Now, those are the two cards that I have that I really want a ban in the modern format. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know if you think I've hit on the right points, if I'm missing anything. These are just my thoughts. I wanted to put them out there as a solution to you, the modern viewers out there. And I wanted to see what your thoughts were, if this could be what we need. Or heck, if I'm just taking this way too far, as many of you said, and just complaining and screaming to the sky as an old head of modern. Let me know. But remember that even the impossible is possible, and as we ponder that thought, I hope you'll join me next time as we take a glimpse into the unthinkable.